This week on To the Contrary.
First, the Kavanaugh spectacle. Then, Marvel Comics bases its next movie on its most powerful superhero ever, finally a woman. What does this mean for young girls?
I'm Bonnie Urbay. Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, the Senate Judiciary Committee sends Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Senate floor.
With what degree of certainty do you believe Brett Kavanaugh assaulted you?
100%. I have been accused of acting out of partisan political motives. Those who say that do not know me. I am an independent person and I am no one's pawn. My motivation in coming forward was to be helpful and to provide facts about how Mr. Kavanaugh's actions have damaged my life.
Dr. Christine Blasey Ford before the Senate Judiciary Committee making her case, accusing Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault. After hours of testimony by Dr. Ford, Judge Kavanaugh had his say.
Dr. Ford may have been sexually assaulted by some person in some place at some time. But I have never done this to her or to anyone. This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit.
Later in the day, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand and leaders of women's organizations responded, and they believe Republicans will pay at the polls in November if they succeed in putting Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court.
In many ways, today is a high moment and an inspiring moment for all of us because of what Dr. Blasey Ford accomplished and what she did and what she was able to do. But I also think it's a very low moment. I think the way the Republican senators on that committee acted, what they said, treating Judge Kavanaugh as the victim, was disturbing, and it was disappointing. And I think American people and American women and survivors saw that as a statement of disregard. I feel that the way they acted and what they said was harmful to women everywhere, and to our voices, to our views, to our value. And I just hope the American people paid attention.
To those people in power who perpetrate abuse, let me tell you one thing. Your time is up. Sexual violence has no place in our society. Not in Hollywood, not in domestic work, and not in the highest court in this land. Brett Kavanaugh should withdraw now.
To move forward without an FBI investigation, without subpoenaing Mark Judge or any corroborating witnesses, and without giving Deborah Ramirez and Julie Swetnick a chance to testify is a stain on this body and an extreme betrayal to survivors of sexual assault.
It was a dramatic day on Capitol Hill as women gathered to show their support for Ford and survivors of sexual assault.
This is certainly career suicide for anyone who does not understand the importance of this moment. There are a number of women who have come forward at this point, and I believe even when the first woman came forward, the fact that there is someone with such strong allegations against him should not qualify him to be even considered as the Supreme Court justice.
There were also counter-protests supporting Judge Kavanaugh. TTC panelist Patrice Onwuka of the Independent Women's Forum was among them.
What we cannot do is allow to suspend, to turn upside down this idea of a presumption of innocence for political motivations.
At least 2 other women have stepped forward to accuse Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct.
So Sam Bennett, assuming that this goes to the floor and maybe there's a delay for the investigation with the FBI, but maybe there's not, how will Democrats, women, independents react at the polls in November?
Well, my big hope, Bonnie, is the American woman wakes up from her long sleep of complacency. Ever since the misnamed Year of the Woman back in 1992 with the Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas hearings. That is my hope.
I'm not sure that women independents or Democrats gained as much as they would have liked to from the hearings that occurred on the nomination of Kavanaugh, and I think they'll probably vote the way that they had intended to originally.
I think they feel disrespected, and I think that they will remember that come November.
I think it's going to energize the base of both parties, and I can tell you as a never-Trump Republican, watching those hearings this week made me confirm that I am not actually ever going to change to be a Democrat.
All right, and you were thinking seriously about it before the hearings? I was
certainly thinking of not being a Republican anymore, but I was appalled at the hearings. And there was blame to go around on both parts. I do believe an FBI investigation was necessary, but I blamed the Democrats for holding the information to such point that that investigation then became more difficult and became more politicized. We could have had witnesses and had the people who Dr. Ford claimed was at that party questioned. It could have been done in 24, 48 hours.
It still could be done by the FBI investigation, but, I mean, will it change any votes on the Senate floor?
Well, if in fact they corroborate her testimony, of course it will change votes. I don't think it will corroborate her testimony because I believe Brett Kavanaugh.
Well, I just believe that they could have subpoenaed people for this particular hearing. I mean, there is no reason why Mark Judge shouldn't have been there. I mean, how often do you have a rape case or a sexual assault case where there's actual witness in the room?
Well, what the Republicans are going to say about Mark Judge is, oh, the poor guy is, he's depressed. He's got all kinds of mental health issues. He can't get out of bed. He's got cancer.
And
how can we possibly invade his life?
And you know what I hear? Excuses, excuses, excuses. You can subpoena him. That's how you can get him there. And this is a critically important position. This is a lifetime position where this man would have the ability to rule over women's choices throughout this nation. It's too important to say, let's just let the man off the hook.
Do you think women independents believed him or her?
I think the hard part is when you have two people that are 100% confident in their belief, you're going to need more information than that. And I think whether that means you need an FBI investigation, you need other people to corroborate it. It was 36 years ago. I think we expected to go into a conversation or a hearing to hear both sides and to suddenly say, there's a silver bullet, there's an aha moment, there's a blue dress in the closet, and there's not that, unfortunately. So the fact is we have to get more information, and I think a big part of that doesn't allow people to have the clarity they need to say, I'm 100% certain he's telling the truth, and I'm 100% certain she's lying.
Okay, we don't know for sure. We know that the party line vote took place in committee and that Senator Flake took to the floor to make sure, to say that he wants an FBI investigation before there's a floor vote. Right. But can't Mitch McConnell just say no?
Yeah, but obviously, for example, I think we all agree that we all appreciated Senator Amy Klobuchar's remarks, right, where she said, listen, we've been here before, and we have had candidates that have withdrawn their names on the basis of FBI investigations, and we have not been given the privilege of that information to make a cogent, reasonable decision. So I think what I'm hearing, at least among us, that we all agree here that an FBI investigation is required in order for a decision to be made. But I'm going to throw my hat in the ring, Bonnie, and say, as a survivor of sexual trafficking myself, as a survivor of rape myself, the phenomenon of the false accuser is enormously rare. I think that Ford's testimony needs to be put in the context.
Have you seen percentages of how rare it is?
It's extremely rare. It's below 10%.
1%, below 10%?
Below 10%.
Okay,
and it varies.
All right, and women of color who sometimes need to get motivated to vote, particularly in midterm elections. What's going to happen this November?
They'll turn out strong. And, women of color, black women in particular, turned out strong in the 2016 election, and I would argue voted correctly.
But overall, it was, a lot of people of color, not just women of color, didn't turn out because there wasn't an Obama running.
Well, I don't know that it was necessarily because there wasn't an Obama. I think that there were some issues with the Hillary campaign. I'm just going to be very frank about it, that she could have done a better job with her campaign. But we see what's happened since then. We see what happened in Alabama. Black women are the reason why you have a Doug Jones in the Senate right now. And so I expect that same sort of enthusiasm with this next election, because we see clearly what's at stake here.
I think what's important now is to make sure that it doesn't appear as though this effort by Republicans and by the Senate Judiciary Committee is obligatory, that we checked a box by having someone who was accusing a Supreme Court nominee of sexual assault in any way. I think the important part here is to make sure the process is right, because we talked about this with Linda and others. I think the concern is that you're going to have nominees who are going to continue to go forth through this process, and it needs to be done the right way, but everything needs to be vetted. And if this is really, truly advise and consent, that's what this needs to be. And I think the process broke down a couple of weeks ago, and it needs to be corrected. So if it takes a week to get it right, it's going to take a week to get it right.
And the polarization that we saw, I'm sorry, I have been personally smeared by Democrats. I have had the kinds of attacks.
When you ran for the U.S. Senate.
When I ran for the U.S. Senate and when I was up for my labor nomination. So I know that the Democrats can do this. And yes, do Republicans do it sometimes
Because when I ran for U.S. Congress, trust me, I got smeared felicitously by the Republicans.
Okay, so it can happen on both sides. But the point is, it has become such a partisan process.
Yes.
And voting for Supreme Court justices, there is not a single Democrat on that committee who was going to vote for Brett Kavanaugh regardless. And so so I think this became a kind of excuse, and I think it did become a let's turn out the vote and try to get women riled up. Well, I sat there watching, not as a white male of privilege, but as a working class Hispanic female, and I am telling you, I found him more credible than I found Dr. Ford. I found lots of holes in what she said, including how she got to the party, how she got home, the distance her family
Which again, Linda,
lived.
if there had been an FBI investigation,
we could have found that out.
Well, and now maybe there will be.
Maybe there will be.
Will there be enough pressure on Mitch McConnell to delay for this is a guy who, by the way, was scheduling procedural votes over the weekend so senators couldn't go home and get reaction to the hearings from their constituents. He didn't want them to hear, we believe.
But I think Linda hit on that. This is the problem with this, is that it is political. And I think whether we want to admit it or not the smear, not necessarily the agenda, the politics of personal destruction, this is political. And so the fact that Republicans would like to get someone in that seat, Merrick Garland is a good example of how we're playing this tit-for-tat game in politics right now, which is we have to get someone in this seat because what if we lose in November?
It's more like tat for tat. Because the Democrats lost on Merrick Garland and they're going to lose on Kavanaugh.
The problem isn't Mitch McConnell. The problem is Donald Trump. Donald Trump and the executive branch is the body responsible for sending out FBI investigators, and he is very mistrustful of the FBI, and I think that's playing a role.
Do you think that's the only reason?
I don't know. I actually think it's probably the primary reason, and I also think it's the reason why Brett Kavanaugh didn't say, oh, yes, I'd like the FBI to go out, because that might have gotten Trump to pull his nomination.
No, I believe, I want to go back to this credibility issue, because I do not for 1 second believe that Kavanaugh was more credible than Dr. Ford.
Agreed.
I mean, Dr. Ford testified as
evidence.
but he had lies. Okay,
No,
let's just put this on the table. Let's just put this on the table.
Witnesses.
Because someone who, first of all, if you tell a small lie, it makes me wonder, then should I believe anything that's coming out of your mouth?
Well, and Senator Blumenthal brought that up, that there's an instruction that judges give to juries that said if you think he lied at all or she lied at all, then you are allowed to believe that they lied about that person lied about everything.
Absolutely. So when you hear him say that the Devil's Triangle is a drinking game, that's a lie.
Or that ralphing is that because he had an upset stomach.
That's a lie.
All through high school.
Absolutely.
I laugh.
When you hear him make excuses about the references that he and his friends in high school make to a specific woman, where they call that they're an alumni of him.
Alumnius.
Exactly. And he makes that sound so innocent. That's a lie. Okay? But it's consistent. It's a character flaw. And what we saw with her is completely consistent with what we know happens with people who have experienced trauma. A truthful person will admit, I don't remember that. Right. A liar will make you think that they thought every particular detail in place because they are lying.
Unless she said, yes, I was taken to the party by X, and that person could come in and say, no, it didn't happen. And there was a calendar there that showed
more credible.
Summer.
I worry a little bit that when you think about going through someone's yearbook, one of my problems with Brett Kavanaugh, and again, I don't think that he was lying. I think my problem with Brett Kavanaugh is the fact that he seems like a choir boy, and people all make mistakes. And I think the average person,
seem like a choir boy yesterday.
But if you watch this and you listen to him talk, like not drinking, not doing certain things, it did feel off, because I want to know that somebody maybe when they were 17 had too much to drink and party, but I don't want to know that they sexually assaulted someone, but I want to know that they're fallible. And I think to some extent he showed no fallibility to me and no contrition, which concerned me more than anything, because I
talked a lot about drinking. I don't know.
But that's okay if you're 17, also, not if you're 53.
But if I could, just for a moment, to go 10,000 feet up in the air on the landscape of this, the electoral landscape of this. I'm disturbed as a former Republican, right, who works very hard to be as bipartisan as I possibly can whenever I can, that this repeat of the Clarence Thomas hearings. And what does that do to the Republican Party? That worries me, because when we wrote our system of government, we wrote it as a two-party system. So we all go down with the ship if the Republicans are completely discredited. And I feel that this is not a good thing for the Republican Party. In addition to that...
Let me ask you this, though. I want to get to specifics. As of the end of the week, the website 538, the New York Times, was giving Democrats a 4 in 5 chance of taking control of the House. How did the hearings, how did the committee vote with the request by Senator Flake that there be an FBI investigation before there is a floor vote affect that? Will it make more Dems turn out and vote more Dems into office, or more independents to vote for Democrats or Republicans? What are our predictions?
To be honest,
here?
I have to agree with my sisters across the table here. I think that both parties, when it got partisan, I think it catalyzed the base of both parties. But I think the uptake from this is that it's a further reinforcement, again, that we as American women need to wake up from this sleepwalk we've been engaged in since the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings. And I think it gives voice to something that's extremely important. I'm 61 years old. I was sexually trafficked, and I was raped as a young adult. Did I talk much about that until I had experienced 30 years of therapy that's still ongoing? No. Why? Because the culture does not support the vocalization of that trauma. And let's not kid each other.
It's starting to.
It's starting to. So our big danger here is, once again, we start sleepwalking again and pretend like we're all Sleeping Beauty again, instead of taking this moment in our culture's history to move that particular needle.
You're a Republican consultant for a living. After the hearings and after the committee vote, do Dems still have a 4 to 5% chance of 4 out of 5, chance that they will take the House? And what happens to the 9 toss-up Senate races? Especially where what was telling to me was O'Donnell at the Donnelly from Indiana, red state, a Democrat, came out and said that he would vote against Kavanaugh. Now, that, to me, he's talking to people at home, and he's finding out that more women, particularly women voters, are going to support him if he votes against Kavanaugh than if he votes for him.
Sure, I think the data, at least the 4 to 5 number, I think is consistent. I'm not sure, as I said at the beginning, not as much has changed since yesterday. Now, if this
you mean since Friday?
Since Thursday. I think if the environment were to change in the sense that there's an investigation and that we've delayed this vote in some way, it's possible that maybe that shifts the conversation. If the nomination's withdrawn, if he's not confirmed for some reason, that changes it. But as of right now, if he's set to be confirmed, I think we're at status quo, which is that people are where they are, and Democrats are very likely to continue to have the turnout they need to win.
But isn't it all about motivation?
Not the title.
I mean, Democrats have the numbers, yet Republicans are better at turning out. So at the end, isn't it about whether this motivates Democrats or not? And you're saying it won't? You're saying status quo?
Well, Democrats were already motivated. I'm not sure.
My fear, Bonnie, and this is going to sound counterintuitive because I am a Republican. My fear is I think we'd be better off right now with divided government. I would like to see the House go Democrat. And therefore, my fear is that this is going to motivate the Trump base more than it motivates the Democrats who are already motivated. I'm actually worried it's going to motivate.
We are out of time. Sorry. Thank you all for a wonderful segment on this issue, but we got to go to the next one. Please let us know what you think. Follow me on Twitter at Bonnie or Bay. From Supreme Court hearings to comic-themed movies.
The future of Marvel Comics is female. According to the head of Marvel Studios, the female Captain Marvel, whose movie is in the works, is, quote, more powerful than any character we've introduced thus far, end quote. Actor Brie Larson will lead Marvel's first movie starring a female superhero. Some analysts believe she'll become Hollywood's next billion-dollar star when the movie is released next year. But others say the hype might be a setup for failure, because DC Comics set a high bar with Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman grossed more than $800 million at the box office last year. Marvel Studios is owned by Disney.
So is this a marketing ploy? And if so, well, of course, all Hollywood is about marketing ploys. But what impact on little girls? Can we ever overstate the effect of pop culture on little girls' perceptions of themselves?
I think that, we talk about Wonder Woman and the success that DC Comics had with Wonder Woman. I was never someone who followed, like, comic books or things like that, but I do think that young women and young girls look for more role models. They look to television, they look to cartoons, they look to the internet to find those things, whether that's through politics or otherwise. And I think the Marvel movie is a positive sign. Now, is it a ploy to get more women engaged? I think Disney probably needs it more than maybe some of the other networks who I think have struggled, frankly, with gender issues, too many princesses and too many sort of stereotypes among young women. And so if women want to see a strong, empowered figure, maybe this Marvel effort is really something that will really prompt them to have the sort of similar effort that DC Comics had with Wonder Woman.
Will boys see girls as more powerful if they go see this movie?
Oh, I hate these movies. I hate these characters. I want to see women looking at movies like Hidden Figures and seeing in these, spunky, in this case, African-American women who were, in the typing pool, come up with the answers to how we launch a rocket. This idea of these fantasy figures, I actually think that's the wrong image we ought to be pushing. I think little boys are actually harmed by these superhero images, and I don't think
by little female super or white people?
By male. I think this whole superhero thing is negative. I don't like it.
Oh, well, Linda. Now, I have a 16-year-old son, and I just want to say I finally have somebody that I can go to the movies with. I'm the one that was always, I went to every single one of the Terminator movies. I am all about science fiction. I'm all about action flicks, and there's a whole bunch of people that think the same way I do. It's pure escapism, and I think it's fabulous to have women in those roles. My son loved Avis Jones-DeWeever.
Okay.
My son,
how is he coming out as a gender fair person, not biased?
Absolutely, yeah. And so as a young boy, he was fascinated by Medusa in Greek mythology and Avis Jones-DeWeever in the Star Wars anthology. So I think finally we had Wonder Woman, which was a fabulous movie, let alone the actors. It was a fabulous movie.
And don't forget Black Panther.
Black Panther was great, too. I think the real bar here for Marvel is to make a great movie first, right? And then let the great actress tell her story as a protagonist.
And I'm the son of I have a 15-year-old son, right. And I would have to say he is a self-proclaimed blurred, a black nerd, right? So he loves all the comic books. He's a DC person over a Marvel person, and apparently that's very important. So I want to put that out there. Yep. But I'm sure he would love something like this because he gets into reading the comics. He loves the story, and he loves to see it replicated on film. So even though this is Marvel, I think he would enjoy this movie. Yeah, there we go.
I think to some extent you made this great point too, which is that people are looking for an escape, and so I would love to watch Hidden Figures every day of the week, and I agree with you, but I think to some extent people do get excited to go to the movies and to see a strong character, despite the fact maybe it's fantasy. It is kind of nice to escape a little bit in this day and age.
What about the theory that this is overhype? Wonder Woman, which I also saw. And I'm, unlike you, I am not into action flicks, but I just had to see these iconic movies, and I will go see the one that comes out in March. But are they setting Captain Marvel up for defeat because Wonder Woman made $700 million, and now they're expecting...
But that remains to be seen. It's sort of the Hollywood's version of the R and the D, the two sides of the aisle, right? It's Marvel and DC. But the important thing, I think, in all of this is you have Hollywood producers and a huge conglomerate like Disney going, Oh, there's money to be made in women. Oh, and I think that's important. I think that represents a shift, and that is important.
Absolutely. I mean, you see what Marvel did with Black Panther, as you mentioned. I mean, a record-breaking movie, right. And so,
and it really was. Aside from being an action flick and being more about special effects, I thought almost than content. It was fabulous.
It was fabulous, and it also it featured strong women. I mean, the security force for the king, all women. The scientist, all a woman. You know, his princess. So you know, it kind of continued that theme of having strong women leading the way.
And it was great in terms of, I think, making progress
and it was a great
for
film.
African Americans.
It's a great film.
That's it for this edition. Please follow me on Twitter and visit our website, pbs.org/to the contrary. And whether you agree or think to the contrary, see you next week.
Funding for To the Contrary